Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this introduction to Lessons of the Hour Frederick Douglass by Isaac Julian. My name is Jonathan Binstock. I'm the Mary W. and Donald R. Clark Director of the Memorial Art Gallery. And I'm very glad you're here with us today. Thank you for joining us. Before I begin my presentation, I'd like to share a few Zoom webinar tips to those new to the platform. If you would like to ask a question, and I hope you do ask a question, please submit it through the Q&A function that is located at the bottom of the screen. I will answer questions at the end of my roughly 20-minute presentation, so we'll have about 10 minutes for Q&A. Ask those questions anytime you like, and we will get to them after my introductory remarks. If you would like to view this session with closed captions, then click the CC button on the bottom toolbar and select Turn on Subtitles, and that way you'll get your captions. So, welcome again. Let me see here. There we go. Lessons of the Hour, Frederick Douglass. The Memorial Art Gallery commissioned Isaac Julian to create a work of art inspired by the history, politics, and culture of Rochester back in 2016 or so. The installation was fully realized and it premiered at the Memorial Art Gallery in 2019. It was a 10-screen installation inspired by the words and the life and episodes in the life of Frederick Douglass. Instrumental in this process of bringing Isaac Julian to Rochester was the curator of the project. I have to use my clicker apparently, and not my arrow keys, John Hanhart. The magical John Hanhart, one of the most important curators of media arts in the world, happens to be from Rochester, born and raised here, and graduated U of R in 1967. John was our consulting senior curator for media arts for a period of 3 years, and it was over that 3-year period that we commissioned Isaac Julian to make this work of art for us. Of course, Frederick Douglass is buried in Rochester and lived in Rochester for 25 years. He did his most important work in Rochester. So it was a very much an appropriate work of art for the Memorial Art Gallery to commission. Thank you, John. Visiting the show at the MAG was a dramatic, very wonderful experience. I hope some of you got to see it. Here is a photograph of the entry to the exhibition, and you can see the words "Reflections on Place" above the doorway. Reflections on Place was the title of the series of commissions curated by John Hanhart. The other artist to complete a work of art for this commissioning program was Javier Tellez. But here you see a very dramatic view of the entrance, and deep inside this very dark space is a tintype photograph of Frederick Douglass made by Isaac Julian. It is of, really, it depicts the actor who plays the role of Frederick Douglass, Ray Fearon, and I just want to give you a sense for what these tintypes look like. The tintype is an antiquated photographic medium that was common at the time in the period when Frederick Douglass lived. This is of the actress who played the role of Anna Douglass. You see how these beautiful tintypes were displayed in rosewood frames on these suspended pedestals that hung from the ceiling of the MAG's docent gallery. So there were 3 pictures there of Frederick Douglass, of Anna Douglass, and of James Presley Ball. We'll learn more about these characters in a moment. Once you moved into the second area of the exhibition space, there were 10 screens. I love this particular moment in the roughly 25 or 30-minute 10-screen video installation when you see the beautiful fall foliage in the Scottish Highlands, Frederick Douglass in his red coat, which is echoed by the red carpeting in the gallery itself. And you know, this is an extraordinary experience. Seeing a 10-screen video installation by Isaac Julian, one of the great masters of the medium in the world today, is moving, to say the least. And how these screens interact and interplay and interweave, echo each other, whether because they're always synchronized, but sometimes the same image was across all the screens, and oftentimes different images. So here, Douglas, as he's contemplating nature, contemplating a tree, a very complex tree with curved branches and so forth, a single image appears on one of the screens of feet and legs dangling, hanging from a tree. The reference is, of course, to lynching and what would be the tragedy of the Jim Crow era, many years after Frederick Douglass made his trip to Great Britain, to Ireland and Scotland and England. But this is an important feature of the installation, this kind of telescoping of time, this bringing the image of Frederick Douglass into focus at different points in our history, both American history and global history, especially as regards Great Britain, which plays a very important role in the life and work of Frederick Douglass. And Isaac Julian, being an Afro-Caribbean British artist, was very interested in Douglass's role as a global actor, as a global figure, as someone who was well known in Great Britain and wielded a great deal of influence there, and learned a lot from his years spent traveling throughout Great Britain and lecturing more than 300 times in Ireland, Scotland, and England. This particular passage, just another sample. You see Anna Douglass, you see her sewing machine, you see Frederick Douglass on a train, and images of their home, a trunk here, and a portrait of Anna Douglass on the wall. So Anna Douglass plays an important role in this work of art, as do other women. In fact, most of the special characters, the characters in Isaac's piece, were women, or are women. Moving along, to zoom in and to kind of, this is going to turn into a little bit of a, I guess, sort of crib notes, and I can't imagine Isaac will appreciate my crib notes, because he'll say, "Jonathan, those are crib notes." But you know, I hope I'm sharing some information that will help you to more fully engage with the single channel video, which we have the pleasure of being able to view here as part of the University of Rochester community and the Memorial Art Gallery community. I hope these comments kind of lead you into a deeper reading of this brilliant 30-minute work, and help you connect all the dots in a way. So this is perhaps not the best way to introduce a work of art, but I think it's useful for us in this context of communicating with each other via webinar. So here you see Frederick Douglass, Anna Douglass, and a gentleman named James Presley Ball, who was an African-American and photographer of the time period, who had a studio and a salon in Cincinnati. And Frederick Douglass visited James Presley Ball. He was photographed by him, and they were friends. So these three figures are contemplating their images as reflected in a mirror. And this is got to be inside the Royal Academy, where Isaac joins as a member of the Royal Academy. He was allowed to film on site in the Royal Academy. More on that in just a moment. But the key thing here is the importance of the idea of representation. The focus that Frederick Douglass brought to the effort to represent himself in a way that would combat the deleterious, the horrific images of Black people in America at the time. They were, of course, enslaved and derided in these images in racist ways. And Douglass understood the power of photography. He understood the power of mechanical reproduction. He knew that in order to create a fuller, better understanding of Black people in America, he would have to be in command of his own image, and he would have to disseminate his own image. And in fact, Douglass was the most photographed man in the United States during his lifetime, which means there are more photographs of Frederick Douglass than even of Abraham Lincoln. So this is a very important part of who Frederick Douglass was and how he thought and how he worked and how he endeavored to make an impact on how people view and understand African Americans. And this image really sets the stage for the complexity of the thinking that is involved with determining self-representation. In another part of the incredible lessons of the hour film, you see Anna sitting for a portrait and Frederick off to the side. The truth is, there were not many portraits made of Anna Douglass. I can think of one that is reproduced quite frequently, but it was Frederick who was always figured. And I suppose Isaac's kind of changing things around a bit here, and that's the artist's prerogative to edit and to conceptualize and to tell a story that needs to be told, but which isn't necessarily told through the histories that are generally written or presented. So in fact, Anna Douglass was incredibly important in the life of Frederick Douglass, and she enabled Frederick Douglass. She made Frederick Douglass's beautiful clothing. She helped him to construct the image that he so successfully conveyed to an international public. So Isaac is really showing us through his film in a way that hasn't been shown before in this medium, the importance of Anna Douglass. These are my amateur snapshots of my visit to the Frederick Douglass home in Anacostia, Washington, D.C. It is truly amazing. I highly recommend that you visit this house museum. Everything is exactly as it was when Frederick Douglass lived there. He died in the foyer of the house. He collapsed there and then later died. And everything is preserved as it was. And all of these details and all of the details in Isaac's film are so important. Every detail counts. Every detail has been considered deeply. And I'll just point out one of my favorite details, and I'm gonna circle it here. This is in my snapshot, Frederick Douglass's souvenir replica of Hiram Powers, the Greek slave, which is now in the Smithsonian American Art Museum's collection. Douglass loved that sculpture, this classical sculpture of a naked, it would seem, white woman who was a Greek slave. And he took it with him. He carried this replica with him when he traveled. Quite extraordinary, and that's information that I gleaned from David Blight's incredible biography on Frederick Douglass. But this is what amateur photographs look like, and this is what an artist's image looks like. I grabbed this from the video. It shows that sculpture of Hiram Powers, Greek slave, and you know, everything is perfectly framed. The light is soft and warm and glowing, and there's nothing not stunning. I mean, everything is so delicious in this work of art. Everything is so beautiful and perfectly rendered. Isaac being the master that he is of the medium. And you know, this takes a lot of work. Here's a behind the scenes photograph of 5 people on Isaac's crew inside Frederick Douglass's home, thanks to the National Park Service for allowing Isaac to have access to Douglass's home and to set up in spaces where visitors such as myself did not have access to. So we were all roped off. You know, you can see these rooms from afar, but Isaac was able to get into the house and take the pictures and make the motion pictures that he wanted to capture. Here is Isaac. Now, I want to talk a little bit about settings and sites for the filmmaking. We just looked at Frederick Douglass's home. So he filmed on site in the home. Here is Isaac in Scotland in the Highlands. You can see the tall grasses and his crew behind him. And one of the images that resulted And a beautiful part of the installation, when Frederick Douglass is leading this grand steed through the tall grasses in the shadows of Arthur's Seat outside of Edinburgh. And this is really important because this is not an image that you will ever see of Frederick Douglass. It's something that Isaac gleaned from all of the research he did and all of the scholars that he worked with, people like Celeste Marie Bernier, one of the great scholars on Frederick Douglass. In his research, Isaac discovered that Douglass loved horses, that he loved animals, that he loved nature and the outdoors, and that if he could live anywhere, he would have chosen to live in Scotland. So here you see Douglass not as he would have, as he presented himself in those portraits, but as Douglass might have been on his own had he been able to do the things and live the life that he wanted to do and live. It's in other words, an image of the inside, if you will, of Douglass, his heart, his feelings as a person, his preferences, his loves. This is something that the Lessons of the Hour project brings to light in magical ways. So fantastic, so enriching as a way to come to better terms with who Frederick Douglass was as a person. There's a part of Lessons of the Hour that's can be a little bit a little less obvious in terms of what it's referring to. These are the Richardson sisters, Anna Richardson and her sister-in-law Ellen Richardson. They are they're in Scotland here, but they were actually English Quakers. The Richardson sisters, the English women themselves purchased Douglass's freedom. So it was English people who freed Douglass from Hugh Auld, the slave owner who owned Douglass and who arranged for his manumission and paid for it. And here you see them scratching the words "send back the money" in the sand up by Arthur's Seat. Actually, I think that is where they might have scratched the words, because it's the words I remember from the film that are actually spoken by them. But the actresses whose voices play them, it's a little bit complicated way to say something, but in other words, I'm thinking out loud here. And what I mean to say is that the Send Back the Money movement was a movement of English people who wanted to send back the money to the slave holders in the United States who were supporting the growth of the Free Church in Scotland. So in Great Britain. So the Free Church was developing in Great Britain, and missionaries for the Free Church sought support for their efforts from slaveholders in the United States who were very supportive of the Free Church in Great Britain. And the Richardson sisters were a part of the movement to send the money back to the United States because it was blood money and the Free Church should not be accepting such money. So they play a very important role in the life of Frederick Douglass, and here they are. Another site where this film was made was at the Royal Academy. I referred to that earlier when Frederick and Anna and James Presley Ball were looking at images of themselves reflected in the mirror. Here is the lecture hall at the Royal Academy. Isaac is a member of the Royal Academy. He had access to the Royal Academy, and he filmed inside their period rooms, which adds a lovely, a wonderful richness to the piece. And here you see the lecture hall populated in the film itself, and Frederick Douglass is lecturing. He's getting ready to step forward. Now, if you can see on the left side of the screen, there's a woman in green. That is Ottilie Assing, who was a mistress of Frederick Douglass and a very important intellectual compatriot who had a wonderful rapport with Douglass as regards philosophy and other intellectual matters. And she really helped to educate Douglass. On the right, dressed in gold, is Susan B. Anthony, who was quite famously a friend of Douglass. Here you see Douglass looking at pictures inside a salon of the Royal Academy. Again, Isaac making use of the beautiful environment there, the period environment, which makes total sense in the context of this film. Ottilie Assing to the right of the image, and behind Ottilie Assing, James Presley Ball, and back in the left again, Anna Douglas seated and Susan B. Anthony in gold chatting with Anna Douglas. I mean, this didn't actually happen. There's no reason to believe that this actually happened, but it's something, a moment that Isaac constructed for his work of art. Later in the film, you will see contemporary images of Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore is where Frederick Douglass lived when he learned how to read. Baltimore was the city from which Frederick Douglass escaped to New York City and later to New Bedford, Massachusetts, to gain his freedom. And by, again, telescoping time and thinking about Douglass through time, Isaac is able to expand the conversation in important ways. There's a moment where these drone images of Baltimore appear in the installation and in the film. This is Fells Point, as was the image I just showed you. Fells Point, Baltimore, precisely where Frederick Douglass lived and grew up and learned to read. And in 2015, here you see images of the demonstrations and uprisings in response to the death of Freddie Gray. Virtually, I mean, literally a block or two from where Frederick Douglass lived in Baltimore. So this, you know, really strikes home in important ways. And finally, getting to the end of my introduction, a little snapshot of the actors. Ray Fearon in blue, who played Frederick Douglass, or who plays Frederick Douglass, as a Royal Shakespeare Company actor. He is the only person who speaks in the Lessons of the Hour work of art. And all of the words that he speaks are from Frederick Douglass's writings, specifically, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July?" Which is an important lecture that Douglass gave in Rochester, New York, at Corinthian Hall. Lessons of the Hour, which is probably the last lecture Douglass gave, and then Lecture on Pictures, which is a lecture specifically about, specifically a rumination on the power of photography and pictures, and really lays out Douglass's theory of the importance of this new medium and its reproducibility. So I think the final message for my introduction is that this work of art continues to show nationally and internationally. The next presentation will be at McAvoy Foundation for the Arts from October 14th to March 13th. This is in San Francisco, California. I hope to goodness that I can get out there to see it. All 10 screens will be there. You will, if you're out in San Francisco during this time period, please make a visit. You can also expect to see the 10-screen installation installed at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts in Richmond in the coming year or so, at the National Gallery in Scotland, and in 2022 at Tate, London, as part of Isaac's career retrospective, which will be taking place that year in London. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to invite my colleague Bella Clemente to join us, and let's dig into the questions that we have been receiving. And I see that we've received a bunch. Bella, are you going to read them?
Yeah, so we have a lot of questions about where this piece will go next, especially as its 10-screen form. You just listed a bunch of museums that will be showing it. Can you just confirm, will that be in the 10-screen format? And are there future plans to bring back this piece to the Memorial Art Gallery in Rochester in its 10-screen format?
Great, thank you. I'll take this opportunity just to say, you know, how different the 10-screen version is from the single-screen version. The single-screen version has a much more linear feel. It's one screen and it unfolds over 25, 30 minutes. And when you're dealing with 10 screens, you're constantly managing this sort of inundation of images, which puts you in a much more active role and an interactive role. and because you're immersed in the presentation. So don't think just because you get to see the single screen online that you've seen it all. You haven't. You've got to see the 10 screen version as well. And the dates for McAvoy Foundation for the Arts are confirmed October 14th, 2020 to March 13th, 2021. I'm not sure. I don't think the dates for the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts have been confirmed. At least I don't have them here, neither for National Gallery in Scotland or for Tate London. But these will be the 10 screen versions. So try to make it to one of those presentations. Does that answer the question, Bella?
Yes, that's a great answer.
Okay.
From your perspective, how do you think the piece differs in the single screen online version versus the 10 screen installation? Can you just give us a little bit, like, from your perspective as a museum director, how does it affect the piece, the impact of the piece?
Yeah, thanks. I'll say a couple more words about that. You know, it's just, it's extremely different. So, you know, watching the single screen version on a laptop computer, you know, at home, while you're, you know, sipping a hot chocolate or whatever, and going to a special place to see it in a most proper way, a darkened space. I mean, everything about the space is also essentially curated by Isaac. The red carpet, the sound baffle, the screens that are suspended from the ceiling that are beautiful. They're almost like a cloudy plexiglass, and these screens give the projected images a very concrete sensibility, very sculptural sensibility. You know, the sound is surround sound. Maybe you can begin to imagine how different that experience is. I did want to say we do have plans to bring it back to the Memorial Art Gallery, and it's just a big project and a very expensive one. It's going to entail reorganizing our permanent collection installation. So we're working on that, but it's going to take some time. And we have to make space for such a grand media installation.
Yeah, definitely. When the piece is installed in other museums in its 10 screen format, do those museums have to work with the artist like we did when we had it at the Memorial Art Gallery to make sure that the red carpet is there, the placement of the 10 different screens? Like, are those important components for having this piece installed in its 10 screen format at other institutions as well?
Isaac is most definitely hands-on. The only reason why his art is perfect is because he attends to every detail. And so he decides where the screens go, and he works in consultation. It was a firm in Finland, I believe. We had to fly to Rochester, a team of installers from the UK and from Finland. The screens were made in Finland and shipped here. We had 10 projectors, digital projectors that we had to rent. So all of this including the space and how it's laid out, must be considered by Isaac and determined by Isaac. And sometimes he has chosen to use a blue carpet for this installation too. So it's not necessarily always red.
Another question we have is from John. He says, Douglas's lecture, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July," was given in Rochester. It is also brought into the present in the artwork. It's an astonishing speech and so relevant to today. As a university art museum and as part of the Rochester community, has MAG connected this work to the students and local community?
That's a great question, and something we really should do. We have done so insofar as the work was on view at the Memorial Art Gallery, and while it was on view, we, I think, did a really terrific job. We worked very hard to make sure that as many people got to see this installation as possible, and including students in RCSD, Rochester City School District, and in other regional schools. Douglas, And there were also events and programs that involved the university community while the show was on view. But bringing it here permanently will enable us to continue to share the installation in an ongoing way and to establish permanent programs and lessons and opportunities for students of all levels and all stages to engage with this work of art and learn from it. So that's an important part of what we do at the Memorial Art Gallery. We are an educational institution, of course, the University of Rochester, an important private research institution. We're always working on this regard. I mean, and there's always more work to be done, and there's always more people to share it with. But I'm looking forward to it being on view permanently so that we can continue to do this.
Awesome. And then I'll just have one more question for you, and then we are just out of time, just about. So just for one last question, can you just speak a little bit on the importance of Rochester as a place for creating this work and why it's significant that the Memorial Art Gallery commissioned this piece by this artist?
Oh, thank you. Frederick Douglass lived and worked here for 25 years. He published his newspaper, The North Star, from downtown Rochester. I was actually just standing in front of the building where the North Star was located about a week ago, and he's buried here. So we wanted to commission artists to make works of art that had a place here, that made more sense here, that had special relevance here in Rochester, New York. And that was John Hanhart's genius. And it was his conversations with the artists he selected that, you know, ultimately created the process by which works of art were realized. And we're very proud of our, Rochester, all of us in Rochester, of our place in the life of Frederick Douglass, such a grand figure, historical figure. I'm just, you know, I think I have a personal feeling on this, but I just think it's wonderful how Isaac came to Rochester. He didn't film in Rochester, but he spent time in Rochester, and he toured Rochester, and he met with people in Rochester, and he got to know, and he used the archives in Rochester at the George Eastman Museum and at the University of Rochester River Campus libraries. Incredible resources dedicated to the life of Frederick Douglass, including papers and photographs and the like. So much of this informed the work of art that was ultimately made. But it was made from a British vantage point, which, because it was filmed entirely in Great Britain, which is so important, really, to how this work adds to the sum total of what we know about Frederick Douglass. So Isaac Julian is a global artist, and he's a global artist not only because he's known around the world, and he is, from Asia to Australia to the United States and the UK where he's from, but he's a global artist because he makes artworks around the world. He makes art in China, in Brazil, in Europe, in the United States, in Baltimore. He made a work of art there. This piece is the second work that he made, really inspired by an American US topic. So we should all be grateful to him for this incredible work of art and for bringing his vision to Rochester, New York. And not only do we play, I suppose, a role in the life of Frederick Douglass, but we now play a role in the career of this great artist, which is also important to note. So we thank you, Isaac, for your vision and your perfection and your brilliance. We're so proud of this association.
That's it for questions from me. So I will let you give your closing
remarks
now. Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, you're welcome, Bella. Thank you very much for the questions and for helping us today. Thanks to all of you for joining us. I hope you found this introduction useful. And a couple of other words. The single screen version of Lessons of the Hour Frederick Douglass will be viewable exclusively for the university community at home today through Sunday, August 23rd. To view this work, please use the link and password that was included in the reminder email that was sent before the webinar this morning. The link and password are also in the chat box now. We do want your feedback. We hope you enjoyed the program and we would like to hear from you. These webinars and Zoom meetings and so forth are pretty strange things, pretty unwieldy as a medium, but you know, it's the way we share information today. So if you would please take a moment to share your thoughts about the session through a brief anonymous survey, we would be very grateful. We're always trying to do better. Meliora, as we all keep close to our hearts, we aim to do better. So the link for this survey will appear on your screen at the end of the webinar. Just select continue to get the survey. And at the end of the survey, you'll also be redirected to the video link. So with that, I say have a great afternoon, everyone. Enjoy this beautiful weather if you're in Rochester. It really is stunning out there, and stay well. Thank you very much.